You wake before dawn, eyelids heavy, head throbbing from the cold that creeps in through the cracks of your family's ramshackle hut. Your thin blanket is little protection against the chill. You can already hear the distant snuffling of pigs and the clatter of your father's wooden shoes on the uneven dirt floor. Your mother's voice is rough, barking orders before she has even fully risen herself. The world outside is wet and gray, thick with the kind of mud that sticks to your skin for days. This is your life. Poverty, dirt, exhaustion, a ceaseless cycle of hunger and survival. In the cramped darkness of your home, you share your pallet with 3 siblings and a constant army of fleas. There is no privacy. There is barely any light. Hygiene is a fantasy for someone richer than you. The only water is icy and foul-smelling. The only soap a hard gray lump reserved for the rarest of occasions. And clothes are handed down until they're nothing but rags stitched into other rags. As a child, you quickly learn that life is not romantic in the slightest. The smell of rotten manure is as familiar as the taste of stale bread. Your hands are calloused before you are 10 years old, red and chapped from work. Every day is a repetition. Help with the animals, dig the hard soil, patch leaking roofs, and pray the rain holds off long enough to keep your only blanket from turning into a sodden lump of misery. The grown-ups tell stories. Boredom is only broken by gossip and tales around the fire at night. Most are stories of hardship, loss, and the dangerous world that lies just beyond the circle of meager firelight. Sometimes, when a traveling merchant or a drunken ex-soldier visits, the stories get darker and stranger. You hear wild tales of witches in the woods, of cruel lords who eat children, and, most bizarrely, of noble women forced to wear chastity belts, iron devices locked around their hips to keep them pure. You and your sisters giggle at the absurdity. You have never seen iron on a woman except in shackles for those accused of crimes. Your mother scoffs at such tales. We're not rich enough for iron and not lucky enough to worry about such things. For women like her, and now like you, the only belt is the heavy leather one your father wears when he is in a rage, or the rope that keeps your torn dress from falling off your bony hips. Still, the rumors persist. The blacksmith's apprentice claims that in faraway cities, knights lock up their wives before leaving for war, turning their bodies into fortresses of metal and shame. The miller's wife snorts, "If my man tried that, I'd hit him with the frying pan." No one knows anyone who has ever actually seen one of these so-called belts, but the idea is just salacious enough to keep it alive. But the reality for you and every peasant girl you know is simpler and far grimmer. Your protection is hunger and fatigue. After a day's work, you are too exhausted to even dream of mischief. Your mother's watchful eyes, the scrutiny of neighbors, and the ever-present threat of disgrace are far more real than any lock and key. Virginity is not guarded by iron but by the daily struggle to survive. As you get older, you notice the other forms of control. When you start to develop, you are told to keep your eyes down, never laugh too loudly, never walk alone. Shame is a leash, and poverty is a prison. Your body is not your own. It belongs to your family, your future husband, the church, and the relentless gossip of the village. Any hint of improper behavior, something as simple as speaking to a boy without a chaperone, can lead to whispers, suspicion, and sometimes violence. At night, after another dinner of watery soup and crusts, your father dozes by the fire. Your mother repairs clothes by candlelight, and your siblings lie in a heap like puppies, snoring. This is when the stories come out again. Sometimes someone repeats the tale of the chastity belt, embellishing it for laughs or shock. Imagine wearing iron pants. Your older brother jeers. You roll your eyes. Even at your young age, you see the absurdity. Iron is too precious, and no one wastes it on foolishness here. If you had a belt of iron, you would sell it for bread. The women in your village know how to survive. They fight, cry, endure. Their bodies are battered by childbirth, work, and sometimes by the hands of their men. The only real locks are the ones on their hearts. You watch your mother and her friends support each other in whispers, sharing herbs for pain or shame, laughing at the men behind their backs. There is a kind of solidarity in hardship, a secret knowledge that the real stories are never as simple as the ones told by travelers. One day, a peddler passes through your village, selling trinkets and knives. He boasts that he has seen noble women locked up in iron belts, that he has even held the key himself. The villagers laugh at him. Everyone knows he would sell his own grandmother for a few coins. But the myth lingers, floating through the air like smoke. That night, the old women gossip about the lords and their strange customs, and the younger girls giggle behind their hands. You listen, silent, aware that the truth is much duller, much sadder, and far less exciting than any of these tales. You fall asleep, your head full of the weight of the day and the endless burdens of tomorrow. If there are legends in your world, they are stories of hunger, disease, and the daily fight to stay alive. Iron is for tools and weapons, not for fairy tales or fantasies. The chastity belt, if it exists at all, belongs to a world you will never see. A world of stone walls and silver goblets, as remote as the moon. For now, you have only your hunger, your family, and the endless, muddy, grinding reality of peasant life. You grow older. By the time your hands are truly calloused and your back aches even when you are standing still, fortune, or what passes for it, grants you a place in the great house that broods over your village. You exchange one kind of mud for another. The castle's walls keep out the wind but trap in the stench, the rats, and the never-ending labor. Your world is still dark and damp, but now it is also ruled by rules and rituals you struggle to understand. As a servant, your place is everywhere and nowhere at once. You scrub floors, haul water, mend linens, sweep stairways, and run messages between kitchens and chambers. You see everything, and nothing at all is meant for your eyes. You learn quickly that the noble family's life is not as clean or elegant as the old tales say. The lords and ladies sweat, curse, bleed, and snore like everyone else. Their silk sheets are filthy, their hair crawling with lice, and the privies stink no less than those of the poorest peasants. But here, in these stone corridors, the stories of chastity belts take on new shapes. Among the noble women, everything is a performance. Their lives are a careful balancing act between appearance and reality, terror and boredom. Their bodies are controlled not by iron as much as by routine vigilance and the cold eyes of their mothers-in-law. Every step is watched. Every word is measured. Their dresses are tight-laced, their hair pinned painfully, their movements choreographed for the endless parade of visitors, priests, and rivals. It is here, in the innermost chamber of the lady of the house, that you see it for the first time. During the weekly cleaning, while dusting shelves lined with odd relics and holy icons, you come across a peculiar object. It is made of rough, dark iron, its surface mottled with rust, its edges heavy and brutal. A lock dangles from a leather thong, and there is something both menacing and ridiculous about the thing. The lady herself, noticing your gaze, laughs, sharp, short, and tinged with bitterness. "A husband's fancy," she says, "not much different from a dog's collar." She waves her hand and tells you to put it away, deeper into the chest where broken jewelry and useless trinkets are buried. Later you overhear two chambermaids whispering. They say the Lord bought it from a merchant during his last journey, hoping to frighten his wife, or maybe his rivals. He likes to tell his friends he has her locked up when he's away. One snickers. But he's the fool. The key stays with her, or else with the steward. No one actually wears those things, not for more than an hour. You'd bleed before supper. Their laughter is sharp, their words cruel, but there's a kind of solidarity in the joke. The myth is useful, and everyone plays along. You soon see how this myth serves more than one master. For the men, the idea of a chastity belt is a badge of pride, proof that their property, wife, daughter, sister, is under lock and key. It is a boast to be tossed around the great hall, a story to entertain other bored men while the wine flows and the fire burns low. For the women, the myth is armor. It offers an excuse, a shield, a way to avoid unwanted advances. I am locked, they say with a wink or a sigh. My husband trusts only iron. Sometimes in the laundry, you catch a noblewoman flashing a bit of chain or an iron plate from under her skirts, and all the maids titter. But everyone knows it is for show. You come to understand that real control in this world is not made of metal. It is made of eyes, of tongues, of rules. The lady of the house is never alone. She is flanked by her mother, her nurse, her steward, and a retinue of sharp-tongued maids. She must ask permission to leave her room, to visit the garden, even to stand at the window. Her letters are opened, her conversations watched. When the Lord is gone, his mother rules the house, peering into corners, asking endless questions, scolding and praising by turns. The young noblewomen, barely older than you, are prisoners of silk and suspicion. Their lives are a dizzying cycle of fasting, prayer, embroidery, and endless waiting. Their worth is measured not in deeds, but in the whispers that follow them. Who looked at whom at the feast, who blushed, who smiled, who spent too long in the chapel. Virtue is not something you keep in a belt. It is something you perform, and everyone is an audience. Some of the older servants remember stories, true or not, of girls sent away for a single rumor, marriages cancelled over a word, punishments handed out for nothing more than a careless glance. You realize, with a chill, that no iron could ever be as heavy as the shame and fear that presses on these girls every day. The belt, if it exists at all, is a prop in a cruel play. One night after the candles are snuffed and the halls are quiet, you are sent to fetch water from the kitchen. You pass the Lord's study and hear laughter. The men inside are deep in their cups, telling tales. I locked my wife before I left, gave the key to my squire, boasts one. Another chimes in. Mine begged for the key, she wept and swore never to look at another man. They all laugh. You know, because you have seen the real belt, cold and useless in its chest, never worn longer than it takes to frighten or amuse. The next morning, the lady's eyes are red. She wears a stiff collar high on her neck, her hair pulled so tight it seems to pain her. You realize that the real suffering is not in iron, but in humiliation, in performance, in the endless, invisible scrutiny of a world built on suspicion. The seasons change. Winter comes. The stone walls grow even colder, and the noble women retreat deeper into their rooms, shrouded in layers of wool and gossip. The servants' hall is alive with rumors. Someone has been seen sneaking into the ladies' chambers. A page is dismissed without explanation. The Lord's temper grows shorter. Through it all, the myth of the chastity belt becomes sharper, more fantastical, as though the story itself could keep out scandal and shame. You grow tired, older still, and more cynical. The more you see, the more you know that no metal could ever control what everyone here is truly afraid of: desire, disappointment, betrayal. The belt is a story, a symbol, a piece of theater. The real punishments, public shame, exile, cold loneliness, are reserved for those who fail to play their part in the endless game. At night, when you return to your straw mat in the servants' loft, you sometimes hear the girls whispering, half afraid, half laughing, about the lady's iron underwear. You remember your mother's scoff. We are not lucky enough for iron. Now you know that even those with iron are not lucky, only trapped in a different kind of misery. The myth grows, passes from one mouth to the next, from servant to lord and back again. By the time you fall asleep, the castle is silent, heavy with secrets. Somewhere locked away in a chest, the real belt waits, gathering dust and rust. But in the minds of those who live here, its legend is as sharp and cruel as ever, a story more binding than any chain. The years roll forward like a squeaking cart, each season much like the last, marked by rain, mud, and monotony. By now you have left the stone corridors of the castle, driven out not by scandal, but by pure exhaustion. The world outside is wider than you remembered. The air is sometimes sweet with the smell of grass or dung, and the sun can be warm if you are lucky enough to have a day to yourself. But you are never really free from stories. They cling to you like the lice you once tried to scrub away. You find work in a nearby market town, a place always buzzing with the shuffle of feet, the calls of hawkers, and the sickly sweet stench of people pressed too close together. You haul sacks, sweep doorways, carry buckets, run errands for a baker who pays mostly in stale bread. You quickly learn that in the marketplace, nothing is as precious as a good story. Tales are traded here like coins, sometimes for laughter, sometimes for fear, and sometimes for the pure relief of believing that somewhere, someone has it worse than you. The chastity belt is one such tale. It is no longer just a joke among tired servants or a prop in a noblewoman's farce. Here, it is a product, a threat, a marvel, a riddle. You first see one in the hands of a traveling peddler who sets up his cart near the center of town, arranging an odd array of rusty ironwork, battered flasks, broken combs, and exotic relics from distant cities. He is a showman, draped in rags that were once bright, his beard stained with grease, his mouth quick with both charm and insult. He waves a twisted, iron object above his head, shouting so that the crowd clusters close. Look here, the tool of control, the end of all female treachery, the secret of kings and crusaders. His words spark snickers and sly glances. He winks at the young men and glowers at the old women, spinning stories of cuckolded lords and unfaithful wives. For just a few coins, see how the mighty kept their ladies pure, he bellows. The thing he holds is ugly, rough and pitted, with a crude lock and holes in odd places. It is heavy, but it is also, unmistakably, a fake. Even you can see that. The edges are unfinished, and it looks as if it was cobbled together from farm tools and spare chain. But that hardly matters. The power of the object is not in its iron, but in the gasp it draws from the crowd. No one really expects to see such a thing. Not in this world of cracked lips and thin soup. You listen to the audience. Some are thrilled, some horrified, and a few scoff openly. If my man tried that, I'd take a hammer to his head, laughs a toothless woman, earning applause from the younger wives. But the peddler only grins wider. He knows the game. Fear sells as well as fascination. A worried mother might buy a crude belt for her daughter as a warning. A lecherous old man might buy one to show his friends in the tavern, and every once in a while a priest will buy one for his own dark sermons. The myth mutates, multiplies, and travels, morphing with each telling. The town is alive with stories. A blacksmith claims to have made a dozen belts for a nobleman up the road. A tanner says his cousin wore one for 3 years and never walked the same again. An old beggar swears he saw a lady try to drown herself rather than be locked by her husband. The children giggle, the mothers sigh, and you, older and a little wiser, see it all for what it is. You meet others who trade in these stories. One night at the tavern, you share a bowl of thin stew with a grizzled ex-soldier who claims to have been paid in gold by an Italian lord for guarding the key to his wife's honor. He winks at you, but you see the sadness in his eyes, a sadness that knows the difference between war and the stories men tell to forget it. Later, a merchant's daughter confides in you that she wore a piece of iron tied with leather as a joke to fool a visiting suitor, only to laugh at him behind closed doors with her sisters. The markets themselves are a stage. The fear and curiosity of the people become a resource, a well to be drawn from again and again. Some belts are made new by clever smiths to be shown at fairs or sold to collectors. Some are dug from the trash of old estates and polished up for maximum effect. For every real piece of iron, there are 100 stories, each more absurd than the last. You see that the true power is not in the object but in the story, how it makes people feel, what it lets them believe. It is easier to believe in the threat of cold iron than to face the everyday realities. Hunger, boredom, violence, and the constant, grinding lack of hope. The story of the chastity belt is, in its way, a comfort. A way to imagine that control is possible, that order can be imposed by force, that shame and desire can be contained by something as simple as a lock. But you know better. You have seen women break under the weight of real chains. Poverty, expectation, humiliation. You have seen how easily a story can become a weapon, wielded by mothers, priests, lovers, and strangers alike. You remember how the belt in the castle was kept not on a body but in a chest, gathering dust, while the real pain played out in whispered words and cold glances. Sometimes you hear a different kind of laughter in the crowd, bitter, knowing, hard. It is the laughter of those who have survived worse than iron. They tell their own stories, of clever girls who tricked their watchers, of mothers who hid their daughters, of sisters who covered for one another when the priests or lords grew too curious. The myth of the chastity belt becomes part of a broader tapestry of fear and resistance, of power and survival. At night, the market square empties. The peddlers pack away their wares, and the stories settle like dust. You watch the people drift away, some smiling, some shivering, some deep in troubled thought. The belt, real or fake, is just another thing for sale, another symbol in a world full of symbols and stories. You walk home, feet aching, and think about the day's trade. You wonder as you lie down to sleep how many more years the tale will last. How many more will buy, sell, and fear the promise of cold iron. The moon rises, pale and indifferent, and you realize, in a world this dirty, hungry, and hard, it is always easier to believe in myths than to face the truth. And so the story of the chastity belt lives on, rusty, ridiculous, and powerful as ever, a mirror held up to the darkest corners of everyday life. You begin to understand, with a heaviness that settles into your bones, that the stories told about chastity belts are not really about metal or locks at all. You have watched the peddlers sell their wares, heard the laughter and the gasps, witnessed the rituals of power and fear among both peasants and nobles. But now, as you see the darker corners of village life and the endless mechanisms of control, you realize something colder. The true punishment for any transgression, real or imagined, is not the clanking of iron, but the bruising, invisible weight of public shame. It begins quietly, almost always with a whisper. You see it happen to others before you ever feel its claws sink into your own flesh. Someone is accused, A girl caught laughing too loudly with a stranger at the well. A young widow rumored to have taken comfort in the arms of another too soon after her husband's burial. A married woman whose belly grows too fast, or not fast enough. There is never any need for proof. Rumor itself is enough to spark the slow burn of suspicion. You see the women first lose their friends, then their allies. The other wives and daughters begin to cross the street to avoid them, lower their eyes, murmur quick prayers, whisper behind their hands. The men, too, are quick to judge, eager to reinforce the lines between purity and shame. Sometimes it is the priest, sometimes the village elder, sometimes a jealous neighbor who begins the ritual of punishment. The words are weapons sharper than any knife. You hear them hissed in corners, spat across the market square, muttered at the threshold of the church. She is no better than she should be. Her mother was the same. God knows what she does when her husband is away. The gossip coils around the victim like smoke, inescapable, choking, burning away the last scraps of dignity. There are other, more public punishments as well, those designed to leave scars that can be seen. You remember the first time you watched as a woman, accused of adultery, was dragged before the village. Her hair was hacked away with a blunt knife, her dress torn and muddied, her face slapped until her cheeks bled. She was forced to kneel in the square while the crowd jeered and spat. Some threw rotten vegetables, others stones. She wept, pleaded, and finally fell silent. The shame was supposed to cleanse her. Instead, it left her hollow, her eyes forever wary and distant. You see, too, the punishments reserved for men. They are fewer, lighter, almost performative. A few days locked in stocks, a fine and angry sermon from the priest. The double standard is not lost on you, nor on anyone else, though no one dares to say it out loud. Everyone understands that a woman's body is her family's honor, and that honor is a brittle thing, easily shattered, never truly repaired. Sometimes you hear the myth of the chastity belt invoked as a warning or a threat. Mothers scold their daughters, "If you are not careful, we will have to lock you up." Husbands joke grimly with their wives, "Maybe I should buy you a belt, since you are so fond of wandering." Children snicker behind their hands, but the laughter is uneasy. Everyone knows that the real prison is built of suspicion and shame, not iron. The church, ever watchful, does its part. Sermons are filled with fire and brimstone, dire warnings about the dangers of female weakness and temptation. The priest's voice thunders through the cold air. "A woman's virtue is her shield and her family's glory. Let no girl fall into sin, lest the wrath of God descend on us all." You watch the faces of the congregation, some terrified, some bored, a few sullen and defiant. The girls look at their feet. The mothers glare at their daughters or at each other. You notice, too, how women themselves become agents of control. Mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and sisters watch each other with hawk-like intensity, eager to pounce on any sign of disobedience or scandal. Sometimes it feels as if the whole village is held together by a thin, trembling web of vigilance, everyone forever on the brink of accusation or disaster. Iron belts are not needed. The fear of disgrace is leash enough. No one wants to be the next example, the next victim. Everyone learns to keep their head down, their voice soft, their eyes on the ground. Desire is something hidden, whispered about in the dark, never named out loud. Even a hint of joy can become dangerous if seen by the wrong person. The few chastity belts that do exist are mostly theatrical, oddities dug out for fairs or to frighten a gullible suitor. If they are ever truly worn, it is not for safety, but for show, for ritual, for the cruel pleasure of humiliation. You remember hearing of a girl whose father locked her into an iron contraption before her wedding night, not to protect her, but to shame her, to prove to his neighbors that she was untouched. The key, it was said, was lost, and the smith called to break the lock had to do his work before half the village, the girl sobbing in shame and rage. No one speaks her name anymore. Her family moved away soon after. You see the same patterns again and again. The belt itself is almost irrelevant. It is a symbol, a ghost, a threat made of cold metal and colder words. The true horror is in the rituals of suspicion, the public theater of humiliation, the everyday violence of a society obsessed with purity and control. Sometimes, late at night, you dream of a world where such things do not matter, where laughter is not dangerous and desire is not deadly. But you wake to the same chill, the same whispers, the same unending grind of labor and fear. You come to understand, in a way that is both profound and deeply sad, that in your world, the hardest prisons are built not of iron, but of memory, shame, and poverty. A chastity belt can be removed. The mark of public disgrace, the knowing looks, the sudden silence, the lifetime of suspicion can never be undone. By now, you have seen enough to know that every woman in your world carries her own invisible chain, forged from years of vigilance, gossip, and fear. You watch your own hands as you work, rough, strong, always moving, always careful. You listen to the whispers, the jokes, the threats, and know that you too are locked in place. Not by metal, but by the heavy, suffocating weight of what might happen if you ever step out of line. And so life continues. The stories are told, the rituals repeated, the punishments carried out. Iron belts are rare, humiliation is everywhere. In the end, you know the truth, even if you cannot say it. The real chastity belt is woven of shame, and in your world, no one is ever truly free. The years pass and you become someone's elder, a bent shadow shuffling through the village, watching the world spin through familiar cycles of rain and mud, birth and death, scandal and silence. The hands that once scrubbed floors and packed bread now clutch a rough walking stick. The voice that once whispered secrets now tells stories to children huddled around a smoky hearth, their faces hungry for magic, mystery, or just a moment of comfort before the next hard dawn. You tell them tales of lords and castles, of clever maids and foolish knights, of witches and ghosts and, yes, of the iron belt. You do it for the same reasons your mother and hers did before her. To pass the night, to teach caution, to remind the young that the world is neither fair nor safe. The old stories live longer than the oldest stones. The children's eyes widen, and sometimes they laugh or gasp, but they always listen. Yet behind your words, you know the truth. You have never seen a chastity belt locked in anger or fear, only as a battered curiosity in a trunk or as a joke among women who have seen much worse. The iron is always cold, the locks always stiff, the keys long lost or never forged at all. What lingers is not the metal, but the stories that stick to it, heavier than rust. Your grandchildren are sharper than you were. They ask questions, poke holes in the fabric of the tale. Why would anyone wear something so cruel? How could it keep a person safe? What if you lost the key? You answer as best you can, but you see the smirk in their eyes, the impatience of those who know the world has already begun to change. Yet when you tell them about the shame, about the fear, about the women shunned for laughter or kindness or love, they grow quiet. Even a child can hear the weight of a chain you cannot see. Outside, the world shifts. Iron grows cheaper, but food remains dear. Merchants still pass through the square, now hawking new marvels, clockwork toys, cheap trinkets, bottles of colored water that promise beauty or luck. But every so often you see a chastity belt among their wares, dull and unlovely with a sign boasting of its power. It is still good business to frighten people, to sell them a solution to their own invented fears. You hear new rumors now, of city scholars and foreign doctors, of cabinets of curiosities where strange objects are displayed for coin. Some say there are museums in far-off places where belts from your land are locked behind glass, catalogued and analyzed and explained by clever men who have never scrubbed a floor or feared a neighbor's whisper. They argue about whether such things were ever truly worn, whether they are real or simply fantasies born of male anxiety and a marketplace for terror. You know, as surely as you know the ache in your knees and the taste of thin soup, that the real belt was always made of stories. Stories are sharper than steel, lighter than air, impossible to destroy. The legend of the chastity belt outlives every woman you have known, every man who ever joked or threatened or boasted. It will live long after you as well, whispered in new ways to new ears, forever part of the tapestry of things people choose to believe. In the long nights you remember the women you have known, your mother, tired and fierce, her laughter full of both pain and resistance. The noble lady who hid her bruises beneath silk and a sharp tongue. The neighbor who vanished after a scandal, her name never spoken again. The girls who dared to dance or love and paid for it in coin more precious than iron. Their suffering was never just a tale, never just a curiosity behind glass. Sometimes you are invited to the larger town, where visitors want to hear real medieval stories. They crowd into the tavern, buy you wine, and beg for secrets. What was it really like? They want tales of monsters and miracles, of knights and witches, of belts and locks. You oblige them because that is what is expected. But as you speak, you study their faces, hungry for spectacle, terrified of boredom, never truly wanting the truth. If you told them the real story, that the world was mostly mud and hunger, that most people died young and afraid, that shame was deadlier than iron and harder to escape, they would not thank you. The truth is ugly, heavy, and dull, so you gild it, just a little. Give them a taste of myth with their ale, and leave them with a chill when the night grows deep. Sometimes you wonder if you are doing harm, helping the lie to grow strong. But it is hard to remember a time when the world ran on anything but stories. You watch as generations turn. The old enemies, poverty, disease, suspicion, change their faces but never disappear. The young are quicker now, less afraid. But the rules linger in the air like the smoke from your fire. There are still whispers, still punishments, still ways to mark someone as different, dirty, or dangerous. The iron belt itself is no longer needed. There are other tools, more subtle and just as cruel. In the end, you are left with your own memories. The stink of old straw, the bite of winter, the taste of fear, the ache of unfairness. You know the stories will survive, will grow sharper and stranger, will outlive even the last true memory of what really happened. One night as the wind howls and the village sleeps, you gather your grandchildren close and say, Be careful what you believe and who you trust with your shame. The strongest prisons are the ones you build inside yourself. You fall silent then, listening to the crackle of the fire. The iron belt is long gone, buried or lost or rusted into dust. But the myth remains, bright and sharp as ever, forever ready to be worn by those too afraid to look at the world as it truly is. And somewhere far away a merchant sharpens his tongue, polishes a piece of iron, and readies another tale for sale. The world turns, the stories grow, and you, at last, let them go.